Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? If you don't know me, my name is Annette Mangi, and I'm the Executive Director of the Retail Dietitians Business Alliance. Thanks for joining us this morning. Today, we have Kim Bedwell with us, who's going to talk about understanding the mushroom shopper. This webinar has been approved for 1 continuing education credit, and I will send out the certificate of attendance within 24 hours after the live webinar. We will also be recording this webinar, and so it will be available within 1 week on the RDBA website. And so if you know someone else who would really like this information, you can direct them to the website in the recorded webinar section. So Kim, thanks so much for bringing this topic forward today. You know, when I was looking at the slides, I love the IRI data. You and I were talking about before the webinar that we could geek out on that data. But so I know our attendees are going to love this conversation today on what else is in the cart, what you can tell us about the mushroom shopper. So I'll turn it over to you, and thank you so much to the Mushroom Council for sponsoring today's webinar.
Well, thank you, Annette. And yes, totally geeking out over this data. I have always loved grocery shopping, loved it. When I turned 16, my mom would give me a blank check to go to the grocery store with a list, and I would do all of our grocery shopping. It was such a treat, and thought I would convert to online during the pandemic, did a little bit of it, but I realized I really love grocery shopping. So when I see this kind of data come in, especially about something that's so near and dear to my heart, like mushrooms, it's just super fun. So as many of you may know, or I've met many of you before, I'm Kim Bedwell. I'm with the Mushroom Council, and we are proud to be sponsors of RDBA. We've done a few webinars in the past, and we're really excited to share this data with you today. What I'm going to go over, see if I know how to use. There we go. Today's agenda, we're just going to very quickly look at a few mushroom varieties, just so that we can get context of the kind of mushrooms we're talking about. And then we're going to go into what is co-purchasing and cross-purchasing, how to use this data in your stores, and just dig a little bit more into what these mushroom shoppers are doing. And then, of course, we'll definitely leave time for questions at the end. So just really top, these are all of these mushrooms are the mushrooms that are in your stores right now. I was just at Fancy last week and had a lot of people asking me about foraging. And the reality is there are 2 different kinds of mushrooms, really, right? There's the ones that you can forage outdoors, and then there's those that are cultivated. And we represent the mushroom growers of the United States. We represent the growers of the cultivated mushrooms. So again, it's going to be your white button mushrooms that you see here. This is the most common variety. Right now, we have that percentage that this represents about 85% of the industry. The reality is that number is actually coming down a little bit. It's making its way for these guys, the creminis. They are incredibly popular. My assumption is that people are, trying out mushrooms with that gateway mushroom, the white button, and then they're loving and experimenting more with flavor, and they're loving what's happening with the creminis. And it does have a little bit of a richer flavor and deeper flavor. So sales of creminis have just been really incredible at grocery, and we're also seeing it more on food service menus as well. This is just a big old cremini. There's a reason why they call creminis baby bellas, because ultimately it's the same mushroom. It just grows longer. The portobello has been around for a very long time, and it really truly is the original plant-based burger. So we're seeing a lot more interest here also with the portobellas, and as more of that meat replacement, you can make it like steaks and fajitas. Shiitake has been around a long time, very popular in Asian cuisine. And then as well as oysters. Now you're getting more into that specialty mushroom category, right? So you're going to find your white buttons, your creminis, your portobellas really at every supermarket. But depending on what retailer you are and what you're carrying, this can vary a lot more. And you're also seeing a lot more producers coming and putting together those multi-packs that have different varieties. So you may see an oyster in there, you may see shiitake, you may also see maitakes in there as well. These are great mushrooms to experiment with, have fun with. A great recipe I'd seen from a chef that we had worked with earlier this year is he took a whole maitake mushroom, had 2 cast iron skillets, got them blazing hot, put a little bit of olive oil in one, put the maitake in, salt and pepper, and then smashed the other cast iron skillet on top of the other one. And so it was almost like that brick chicken effect, really yummy and crispy. And so, you know, there's unlimited uses to mushrooms, but that's something fun you can do with the maitake. And then lion's mane, probably one of the most popular ones that I heard about or people asked about when we were at Fancy last week. This is also can be called the pom-pom. A great way to use this is to tear it up into pieces. And it's really true. If you tear it into pieces and you have it like on your cutting board, it truly looks like broken up like lump crab, and we recommend using it like you would use lump crab. So you know, we have some recipes on our website, but that's a fun one also to even demonstrate in a store to show just a different use for mushrooms. And it may, you know, it may spur somebody to maybe try a pom-pom or a lion's mane, but it also could just spur them to say, you know what, I haven't tried mushrooms in a really long time, let me give it a go, and they may go for the button mushroom. So lots of different options, but we're really here today to learn more about what people are thinking when they're buying mushrooms, what's happening, what are their decisions. And it's really, really interesting because what we found is that today it's all about personifying first how people shop for mushrooms. What are they buying with them? And really that there's no one size fits all when it comes to mushroom buying. So produce right now is an absolute powerhouse in the grocery store. Even in light of inflation, we're still seeing produce command about 30% of total fresh sales. And because produce is such a trip magnet for shoppers, more than half of the time someone goes to, it's really more than half, it's what someone who goes to the store, it's more than half the time what they're going for. They want fresh produce. And we also know that what part of the mushroom category is included in the basket. So what you're seeing here is a total of, anytime somebody buys mushrooms, their average ring up of their total basket is $92.77. That's more than the average. And so that means that one more trip, if someone was buying, if somebody was making one more trip, there's a lot of math in this presentation, so hold on with me for this ride. But if someone was willing to make one more mushroom trip, that really means nearly $100 for the total store, if they're just even putting mushrooms in that cart. So as you would imagine, each type of mushroom does end up averaging a different amount. And we just kind of went through all those different mushrooms. But cremini, as we were saying, you know, it's really kind of this powerhouse. We're seeing this increase in sales. It is actually on average, it has the largest basket size at nearly $106. But even white button mushrooms are just below that at $92.53. And what's really interesting to me is, as we brought this up, there is a way that we can use mushrooms. So if you think about like the target consumer for each of these types, you would think about what the basket would have to correlate with the lowest price mushroom in the category to the highest. But that's not what happened. Because if you see here, an oyster mushroom is going to cost more than white button. And so it really is very interesting. You know, a cremini doesn't usually have that much of a price difference than the white button. So it's not necessarily what they're spending on just the mushrooms, it's the total basket spend. So cremini ended up having one of the highest baskets. And so what we're looking at here, what we're going to dive into is that co-purchase data. If they're getting all the way to $100 a cart, what else are they putting in that cart when they put that cremini in, or when they put that white button mushroom in? And you'll see that it's about the situation. You'll see that it's the situation, not necessarily the consumer, that's driving the basket size. You want to advance, don't you, slides? Come on. There we go. So how do Americans buy mushrooms? Well, first of all, there is an opportunity and growth in reaching more consumers to purchase mushrooms at least one more time. So in the last 52 weeks, only 52.1% of consumers purchase mushrooms at least once. So there's definitely a frequency play here. So if that person makes 7 trips per year, that 52.1% of people, that's 52.1% of people on 7.3 trips per year, they are choosing mushrooms. So that means over 2 months, there's over 2 months between purchases when they purchase mushrooms. And the spending on those mushrooms is about $3 on each trip, which equates to about 1 unit, which when we say units, probably about an 8-ounce pack. And so that's only about $22 per average household per year. So if we just gained 1 more percent of households by making 1 more trip, 1 more time, that's really where the magic happens, right? Because if we know that every time they're shopping, they're putting those mushrooms in, and that's $100, that's a win-win for the mushroom industry and producer, as well as your store. So what we want to embark on in the study that we did is that we're sharing with you is to take a look at why people buy mushrooms. So the data source for all of this data that we're showing for you is the IRI household panel data, which is about 100,000 US households across all of the outlets where somebody may purchase mushrooms. And so as you'll see at the end, for the most part, all of the outlets that we looked at are where people could buy mushrooms, and the majority lies in grocery, clubs, and supercenters. There are a few exceptions with some retailers who do not share their data, and so that is not included here, and I don't know exactly, but there are a few major players who do not share their data with IRI. But all of what we do have is included here. And what we did is we looked at a 52-week time span ending in June. So it went from basically June to June. And the reason for that is we wanted it to include a little bit of what's happening in inflation in 2022 and a little bit of what happened really with the Omicron time period of 2021, because we knew we would get just a little bit on each end, and we didn't want to really look at anything that wasn't fully representative of what's happening now. So we're able to get into not just the mushroom category as a whole, but we're also going to really drill that down into those subcategories like fresh, like dairy, fresh produce, and fresh meat as well. Oops. So let me just define really quickly for you cross-purchasing and co-purchasing. So when we say cross-purchasing, that means a household on any trip. So someone who may have bought mushrooms for a green bean casserole on Thanksgiving, let's say, what are the other things that household often buys that isn't on Thanksgiving? So it really looks at kind of the whole set. It's not just going to be, well, they bought mushrooms at this one time, and so they're the mushroom buyer. It really does look at it from the overall household perspective. And those are going to be really good opportunities to think about the personifying the types of meals and types of shopping that the mushroom buyer is doing. So that's cross-purchasing. Co-purchasing is really an excellent cross-merchandising opportunity, meaning that when someone puts mushrooms in their basket, what else are they putting in their basket with it? And so when you cross-promote, you really are, so with this cross-promotion, you're really getting more of a personification of the household, and co is what they brought with it. So we really want to kind of merge those two thoughts together. So let's look at how we're going to use this information and really how it can apply, to you. And there really are a lot of opportunities in retail, and I say food service as well, because I know a lot of you have delis or you have restaurants where you maybe would be serving more of a ready-to-go option as well. And the consumer is really going through it right now, right? Like prices are crazy across the board, and food and beverage is up almost 25% than it was in versus 2019 pre-pandemic prices. So we're really seeing, I'm sure you're seeing it at your store level. We've seen it from a mushroom buying and purchasing perspective. People are pulling way back. And we've definitely seen that. So there is a lot of pressure right now on everybody to how do we market more creatively, and how do we reach people where they're at right now, and really incentivize them and give them the ideas that they need for making meals that are delicious, nutritious, affordable, and really making sure that we're relating to them on what those meal occasions are. We know that they're eating at home more. Restaurant sales have gone down after the big kind of spike over the summer. It's starting to get a little colder. People are staying in. So really trying to make sure, how are we making it easier and simpler for you to reach your customers? And ultimately, we want to make sure that we're bringing you the right materials for that. So when it comes to cross and co-purchasing, the why is clear. It really does help us give that shopper that helping hand, and they really do need that right now. How can they maybe, stretch that meal a little further? And then the how is how we use it and what items we can really kind of bring together to help them, make it easier for them. Things that they're already buying, how, we don't want to make it more difficult and have them all over the store. If they're making some choices already, even in the produce section, how can we make it simpler for them to eat more healthfully and bring more creativity and things that also bring value to their table? So in a digital and print ads, where does it make sense to maybe slap some mushrooms next to a promoted item? Or think about mushrooms on steak, or mushrooms next to spaghetti sauce or broth? Really looking at recipe development and what are those opportunities where, we can really challenge that light user of mushrooms into maybe more of a medium user. We're really trying to get them to eat more plants and get more of those plants on their plate. How can we make it easier for that to happen? And so what are those new applications that we can provide to them? And as as retailers, how can you develop those meal deals? Ones that could be good, that could include mushrooms. And as people buy more fresh produce online, what are the items that should be recommended as an also buy? So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And also, if people were buying mushrooms, what are the also buys there? And is there a cross promotional opportunities? So let's take a look at co-purchasing. I'm going to take a quick sip. This is the overall broad category level. This is the very highest level that we looked at, which is considered the cooked category level. And so what you're seeing are those broad areas within your store where people often buy other items when they buy mushrooms in the same basket. So while they're in the produce department, they spend time and money on other fresh produce like cooking vegetables. Cooking vegetables are considered things like onions or garlic, or salad vegetables, which are like things like lettuce. And then we also see things in their basket like specialty cheese. And there are a couple other items on the list that show one of the other major findings that we found is that the mushroom consumer is much more of a foodie than the average American. They actually either like to cook, gain pleasure in experimenting a little. So it's not necessarily that it's the dairy cheese that they're putting in their cart, which is also there as well, and we'll show you that. But it's very much that specialty deli cheese that is in the cart along with the mushrooms. A couple other products that stand out here are the tomato products and the shelf-stable pastas. So that kind of just doing some math here, that tells me that you're using mushrooms to make pastas. And also that's tomato products, we'll get into that a little bit later, but that's not just like a marinara sauce or something out of a jar. We're seeing a lot of canned tomatoes. So again, it's really getting to that people who are buying mushrooms are also buying canned tomatoes. They're likely cooking. That's, I think, a fairly safe assumption that we can make there, that they are making something either from a recipe or from something that's personal up to them. So here's an example. This is from Central Market in Texas of cross merchandising specialty mushrooms with deli cheeses. And so what they're showing here is a very sophisticated charcuterie board. But what they've done is taken some of the more higher end specialty mushrooms and put those around some of their more expensive cheeses. Excuse me. We're also seeing a lot of retailers doing mixed vegetables. Sometimes merchandise is a very specific cuisine. Here, this one's a spaghetti. Sometimes you see it as a stir fry or a very specific dish that should be made. And then also using the data, using that data and having that co-purchase with the specific vegetable that helps create a mix that people naturally put together. So this last image, I have a lot of images here from the Netherlands. One of the partners that we work with, Anne-Marie Roering, who many of you may know, and we work with very close on our data. She is from the Netherlands, and so she brings back all these really cool, innovative things. And I think there's a lot that we can learn from our friends overseas. And so this last one comes from the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, they have a very high household penetration for mushrooms. They love mushrooms. They also love leeks. So you're seeing a lot of mushroom and leek recipes. And what's interesting here is that on this spice packet, she says that, not just this, but a lot of products, it always says, add 1 250-gram package of mushrooms on the actual package of the product. So, there's just that really easy kind of way to, again, increase that vegetable consumption. We're seeing that. We saw that in the White House conference a few weeks back. How do we get more vegetables on the plate? Here's a great way, and a great way that we can see that from a retail perspective. So now we're going to break into the subcategory level. And so this is where we're able to take the data and look at it a little more granular, because it's, when you look at the whole store, it can be a lot for anybody. We're going to break this down to the different categories. Here, we're going to look at fresh produce. And common vegetables that people buy all the time tend to pop up in the basket at the same time. So this doesn't necessarily mean consumers are necessarily making these things together. You see a lot of, carrots, berries, like berries are regularly purchased. It doesn't mean people are putting berries and mushrooms together, although somebody can make that happen and put a delicious recipe together, I'm all ears. But it doesn't necessarily mean those two things are being put together, but that they are in the basket at the same time. But if you are, it can be a great reminder when you put the carrots in or you put those berries in, it's that habitual, I'm in this section and I always buy this, 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 and this. Mushroom buyers have a great likelihood to buy onions, fresh peppers, tomatoes, and cucumbers all in the same basket. These are the ones that really rose to the top. And, someone asked me last week at Fenty that, they said, well, what would be the dream of, for the Mushroom Council? And it's like, well, we want people to consume more mushrooms naturally. And I said, but it's more than that. And I don't know about anybody on this call, but I know personally, I don't always take huge inventory of everything in my kitchen before I grocery shop, but I always know I need onions. And so even when I'm out, I'm like, I don't know, do I have 1, 2? Not sure. I can pick up 2 because I know they'll be used. I definitely pick up 1 or 2 bulbs of garlic. They're just those things that I know that will be used. And we want mushrooms to be part of that. Do we have mushrooms in the fridge? I think we do, or we just used some of them the other night. I think I only have a couple. I'm going to buy another 8 ounce, or I know we don't have any, and I want to make a couple things. I'm going to get a 16 ounce, or I may get a white and a brown, or quartz and a button. The point is that we want to create that habitual behavior of, just like when you think of onions, you would think of mushrooms, this flavor enhancer, this food, this wonderful vegetable that you want to cook with, and it brings all this wonderful flavor and nutrition. So how could you use this in store? Well, here's some examples again from the Netherlands, but here, veggie kebabs, those have been in stores for a long time. And again, look at what's on this kebab. It's all those things. It's the peppers, it's the onions. Here you're also seeing some zucchini as well. The middle one, or the second one is really interesting. So this is a fun idea out of the Netherlands. And what's interesting is this particular retail created a salad grilling kit. And so, what they did is they took all these pieces together and then they discounted it when you bought all of them together. And so here's another just really interesting co-purchasing idea, that you get the discount when all of them come together, and it's all those same things that people are already buying. So maybe they only had to buy one extra thing because we already knew they were buying lettuce and tomatoes. And were they buying the mushrooms? Not sure, but maybe that was that one extra piece to get the discount, or maybe the cucumber was. But again, it's that opportunity to create something makes it easy for them. Oh, I just do this, 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 and this. They have a nice balanced salad, and also they're getting more vegetables on their plates. So from vegetables to meat, the next subcategory we're going to look at is meat. And as you know, with the Mushroom Council, we've done a lot of webinars and materials with you about the blend. And a lot of you are huge advocates, and we want to thank you profusely for getting the good word out. It's such a great way to not only add nutrition, more vegetables, but right now value. You know, for somebody who's just putting a one, you know, wants to buy 1 pound of ground beef, they take that 8 ounces of mushrooms and finally chop it and blend it together. It really does extend it. It's this great multiplier, and it brings so much value. And oh, by the way, nutrition, flavor, moisture, umami, all those great things. And, you know, that's really been something that the Mushroom Council has been very vocal about lately. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it here as well. But surprisingly, what has come out on top, and I say surprisingly because I have seen a lot about ground beef and the value there, but number one, that is fresh chicken. And it easily tops the co-purchasing of the meat department by far of any of the other fresh meat options. White breast meat is the dominant choice here, but this is interesting. What we did see was a bit higher than average frequency of cremini purchases with chicken thighs. So that's really us kind of crunching the data, but that we definitely saw indexing higher with creminis and chicken thighs. So people are already making those connections. You know, again, here's a great recipe opportunity, or what tools or things that can we give them if we already know these are things that they like purchasing together. So great cross promotion opportunity. After chicken, it's followed by steak, and not just any steak, like very premium cuts, ribeyes, New York strip, filet mignon. So people are indulging, maybe not with any great frequency, but that definitely came in second. So, you know, we're guessing also this co-purchasing, it's probably the mushroom at the side, very steakhouse style, if you will. Then we have bacon, and again, no surprise, I think bacon probably co-purchases with anything. It probably does co-purchase with those berries. Everybody loves bacon. It goes with everything. So, you know, again, that's why it's coming in here. And ground beef coming in fourth, a little like, again, we were a little surprised, but it shows us, the Mushroom Council, that there's still a lot of opportunity for the blend. And so, you know, for us, looking at how we can work with you to tell that blend message, you know, we would happily love to do any sort of co-promotion. And the last piece here is lunch meats. Not huge, but there is something interesting there in the lunch meat. And we'll touch on that really quick. But okay, so how does this kind of show up in your store? So here's an example of a summer, these mushrooms being positioned as summer grilling mushrooms. So very interesting. There's, you know, we could do that, you know, obviously with your private label, maybe there's a promotion, but very much, you know, tapping into that time of year. Jersey Mike's, I think I saw something a few months ago that it's like the fastest growing, you know, QSR restaurant chain. I personally very much like Jersey Mike's. I think they make a pretty darn good sandwich, and especially the grilled portobello mushroom and Swiss sub, which about a year and a half ago was an LTO, and now it is their very first permanent menu item in like 6 or 7 years, which it's hard to become a permanent menu item. So we're seeing, as you saw the lunch meat, mushrooms are really starting to also really dive into that sandwich category. And so, you know, we're seeing it, we saw it at Jersey Mike's. Like anything, a lot of times when you see something at the restaurant level, it does proliferate down to the retail and consumer home level. So we would not be surprised if we start seeing, you know, people maybe doing more of that application at home. And then of course, just suggestive selling in ads, you know, here, a little hard to see here, but this is, you know, a steak with some mushrooms on top of it, just having that visual or providing that visual to stimulate them. And then also in the meat case, I know a lot of you are already doing this, or it's happening in your meat sections, but here we have sausage stuffed mushrooms, you know, right next to your bell peppers, although these could be portobellos. How delicious would that be? Just throwing that idea out there. But, you know, there's, you know, a lot of opportunities, maybe pre-made blend patties that could be sold. So again, there's a lot of cross merchandising that can happen with the fresh meat category as well. Dairy, we talked a little bit about dairy before. The highest co-purchase for mushrooms is shredded cheese, all types, mozzarella, like pizza, right? Cheddar, I mean, Colby Jack, you name it, it's all the types, shredded cheese. This is the highest non-fresh produce item in the same basket of fresh mushrooms. So other common types, eggs, they fall into the dairy category, sour cream, and then really falling down the list was butter. I don't know about you, but sauteed mushrooms, a little bit of butter, chef's kiss, very good, but not the top seller here. So how are they retailing it? You're seeing again more of those pizzas or things like that. Also, when I see a lot of those ingredients, I'll kind of go back to it. I can't help but think of an omelet, right? Eggs, shredded cheese, mushrooms. So again, if they're already purchasing eggs, shredded cheese, mushrooms, those kinds of things, how can we help them find ways to eat it? The quickest way for somebody probably not to make another purchase is to not finish whatever they purchased. Oh, I'm not going to buy mushrooms again. We ended up throwing half of them away. We want to make it easier for them to use those mushrooms so that they will purchase them again. Center store. So center store, always interesting, tons of opportunities. I think even just looking at this, you know exactly what I'm going to say here. It's the one that gives you all the clues, right, of what the meal application opportunities are. Top co-purchases, stocks and broths, so soups, stews, especially right now, soup season. Canned tomatoes, as I mentioned earlier, canned tomatoes fall higher on the list than the spaghetti sauce. So, you kind of do a little bit of DIY with the spaghetti sauce, but if people are cooking, so this definitely confirms a little bit more of that foodie audience. The pasta, specifically long noodles, is how it's described, and then olives as well. So, maybe there is sort of like an Italian sort of pickled salad or marinated salad, or maybe even just in a recipe. So again, you see all these things, you're talking about the foodie consumer. I see spices on here as well. This does not include salt and pepper. Salt and pepper is excluded from the spices. So again, you do have maybe a little bit more of somebody who's wanting to cook. And I think that's a really great place for mushrooms to be when we talk about cooking and giving them those tools. So more affirmation. Tortillas also came in high, and then there's that salad dressing again. So is it just coincidentally because those mushrooms were purchased at the same time as lettuce, because we see that happening anyway, and that's why the salad dressing is coming in? We can't always cut the data all the way to that micro level, but there's definitely some inferences that we can make. So how can we use them? Again, here's some examples from our friends in the Netherlands. The one on the left is really cool. It's really hard to see, but these right here are these different icons, and they're basically like, this is how you can use mushrooms. You can saute them, you could roast them, you can include them in a soup, you can include them in a pie, assuming it's some sort of meat pie. So really cool in that it's, again, this helpful way to help the consumer just a little more, give them that nudge of, I've heard a lot about mushrooms, I'm hearing about them everywhere, but I just don't know how to use them. Little things like that, I think, can be really helpful. And the example on the right is actually from a retailer's website. And so when somebody clicks on this, Knorr spaghetti bolognese spice packet, these other products come up. Would you also like to purchase these? And here it comes up, the long noodles, the spaghetti noodles, 2 different kinds of mushrooms, and some ground beef. So again, it's already kind of doing the math for you. And so again, I know a lot of sites have that, but when we're looking at really trying to improve Americans' diets, we're trying to get more vegetables on the plate, it really would be very beneficial to include different vegetables in these sort of equations. And so now we're going to look at cross purchases. So those were this is now cross. So what else do mushroom buyers buy more frequently than the general population? And so this shows what types of meals and items consumers may be putting together with their items in their pantries and fridges and freezers. we also looked at items with household penetration of at least 10%, and we excluded all others. So we didn't want to get like a real hodgepodge, which could very much happen. But a few things definitely stood out as we kind of looked at the whole cart and what are all the different things that they're buying. First, plant-based alternatives. Mushroom households have a higher likelihood to buy refrigerated and frozen plant-based meat alternatives and other plant-based cheeses or yogurts. Those were on the list a lot as well. So since they were not often in the same basket, we don't have that same high cross-purchase index. So that may indicate that these households are using mushrooms as their source of protein or in other meals they make, fueling that argument that to place maybe a stuffed mushroom or other mushroom in the meat department or something could make a lot of sense. So even if it had, maybe a plant-based meat alternative stuffed in it, that could be a really, great vegetarian or potentially vegan, depending on what you put in it, option. Seafood and mushrooms. So many people say they don't go together. But they do. Both fresh fin fish, with the biggest one being salmon, and shellfish, with the biggest one being shrimp, are bought more frequently by mushroom consumers. So that tells us that's already in the basket. They're buying mushrooms and they're buying shrimp. So how can we help them put that together so that they're buying more in the future, or that they're making those habitual choices together? The deli, very high engagement with the deli. Deli cheeses, meats, not necessarily the prepackaged items, but more of the ones that are sliced, in the store. And that shows that the mushroom shopper is already shopping in the deli department. So what can we also put in the deli department? How can we meet them at different places within the store, not just in produce? And then here again, that foodie nature of the mushroom consumer really comes out strong, right? So we're over-indexing on certain deli cheeses as well: Gouda, Brie, ricotta, fresh mozzarella. Produce, the same foodie, and that explorative quality of them really comes out with they're purchasing more fresh herbs, and making more of those premium purchases. And premium produce purchases tend to be more of the asparagus or an eggplant, Brussels sprouts and the bacon, that makes a great couple, and radishes as well. So again, there's all these inclinations that mushroom consumer is very much filling up the cart and they want to go and cook. And it's also telling us is that look at that average price of the cart too. It is a little higher. So they are putting more of these ingredients and less prepackaged foods in their cart as well. So I'm going to wrap up here just a little bit before we get into questions, which I think we have quite a few coming through. I see some in the chat, but in conclusion, just a few of the trends here. I wanted just to highlight mushroom consumers, especially cremini. And going back to that little rock star, that little brown mushroom, such a rock star. As we've seen, these mushroom consumers are foodies, and it's evidenced by the specialty and premium purchases that they're making. At the same time, they do over-index in the use of frozen meats and seafoods and other frozen offerings, which really points to that convenience piece. So they want to cook, but they also know that they get that convenience from having some of those more frozen options. Fresh seafood is also, more often on the consumer's table, but definitely, frozen takes precedent. And while not too often in the same baskets, consumers do over-index in purchasing a lot of those plant-based alternatives, the meats, the chickens, the yogurts and cheese, and they are shopping in the deli more than any other consumer as well. And so this behavior really does reinforce that opportunity in that heat and eat meal kits, ready to eat. How can we best, share that and get that out to the consumer or customers in your store and help them understand what the ingredients or the foods that are in those kits, why they're good for them, and, why they want to eat more of these really great foods. So that, I think that is the end of my slides. I definitely will open it up for questions. I hope I can answer. I may have to get back to you on some things because we do have a lot of data here, but with that, I'll turn it over to Annette.
Yeah, Kim, really interesting information. It's funny because when you think about some of the data, like I was thinking about charcuterie boards. How are people serving mushrooms on a charcuterie board? I assume they're roasting them or something, but are they seasoning them a particular way, or
So glad to, well, we've seen two ways, and we have some recipes on our site that we put out there. I mean, some people love raw, and power to them. So easy. You just give it a clean rinse and slice or wedge it and put it out there. I think a lot more people are looking for a little more flavor than that, and that's totally fine. I'm one of those. Two ways, and I'm so glad you brought up roasting, because think about what roasting has done with kind of more polarizing vegetables. And I will say polarizing, like the Brussels sprout, the cauliflower, the broccoli, like so ridiculously good when you roast them. Mushrooms are the same. And I mean, it's literally as simple as like 400 degrees, toss them a little to olive oil, salt and pepper, 18 minutes. And it's completely transformative. And then kind of bring it to room temp if you're going to put it on those charcuterie boards, or pickling. Pickling is so delicious. And you can take that in a couple different directions too. You can make them really spicy, which is really fun. You can also kind of go more toward that Mediterranean or Italian feel, and think about like those classic Italian salads that, you would see kind of at an Italian delicatessen, where they have, the whole mushroom, and it's been marinated in this delicious like oregano and garlic and white wine vinegar and olive oil. So absolutely in those ways, but I mean, roasted, so simple, so easy, and good luck getting them on the charcuterie board, because I know my kids will eat them right off of the baking sheet. They're savages.
I love that. Well, we have some questions that have come in, and also our participants, if you have questions, please just put them in the chat. But there's one question, and this is a super interesting one to me, of if in the data, did you look at like mushroom food products? So mushroom jerky or functional mushroom beverages at all? Kind of that whole emerging category.
We did not. And the reason why is the Mushroom Council only represents fresh mushrooms that are grown or that are cultivated. So I'm sure the data could just be so exponential. There wasn't really a benefit for us to find out about those other categories, because it doesn't really influence our growers. But you can't deny the power of what's happening in the jerky category, the powders, the teas and coffees. And, as much as it's not fresh, it's all mushrooms, right? And so it's the rising tides lift all boats. I have to believe that, somebody goes to the store and maybe they've seen something, they've read an article in Eating Well or the New York Times, or saw something on TV, and there is a lot of buzz right now around these powders, but they're not always easily accessible. They're expensive. They're also hard to find in the store. And if you are shopping at Kroger, Walmart, or, ShopRite, Wegmans, you may have a better chance finding that mushroom powder, but maybe in some of the other stores, you're gonna struggle a little bit. So why not start with fresh mushrooms? You know where they are. They're in the produce section. So, I think there's definitely, we're very excited about what's happening in those categories. And so I'm excited to, kind of see how they continue to grow, but I really think it's all good news for the mushroom industry.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's a question about storage of mushrooms. And we all know that food waste, right? And you mentioned food waste, Kim, is a concern to consumers. But can you talk through kind of how long mushrooms are good in the fridge after purchase, and maybe before you open them, after you open them, and how you can tell when mushrooms are going bad?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, moisture is not necessarily mushroom's friend. Now they come wrapped, and this is, food safety, they're wrapped in plastic. It is really to your benefit to, when you get those home, to unwrap them, do not wash them, and put them in a paper bag and put them in your refrigerator. That is by far the best way. Now, they'll last a few days, especially if you don't break them open. They'll last in the fridge for sure. But I know personally, once I crack that plastic, wrap. And I shop at a club store. So when I buy mushrooms, I'm buying like 20 ounces at a time. Very
Oh,
rarely am I
yeah,
using all those at once. So
yeah.
I will transfer those into a paper bag. Now, I also check it. Mushrooms let you know, they kind of get a smell on them if they're not, once they're kind of past their prime. They also can get a little slimy. A
Mhm.
little slime is okay. A lot of slime is not okay. So, one of the things that we recommend, we don't recommend freezing fresh mushrooms, but, the blend, I keep going back to it, but I mean, how simple is this? If you kind of have a lot of mushrooms, just chop them all up, blend it up, use what you need, and then freeze the remainder, and maybe have them in, little freezer baggies or something, or freezer, however you freeze your stuff. And then, pull it out as you would. Oh, I'm making tacos. Here, I'm just going to grab these. They're already cooked. They're already chopped and ready to go. Almost like you would do with fresh herbs. It's like almost the same
Mhm.
approach. Like, my herbs are ready to turn. I know I need to chop them up and, get them ready to freeze. Mushrooms are kind of the same way. But paper
Yeah.
bag, it's amazing how much longer they can last.
That's super interesting. And I never even knew that. Maybe some of our attendees knew that. I don't know. They can throw a comment in the chat, but that's an interesting cross merchandising idea right there, right? Is paper bags, because people aren't really using them for, I mean, maybe lunches are kind of back in style again, taking lunch, but most people have reusable bags. But um, that's a great cross merchandising idea. And that's a really
Absolutely.
simple kind of hack on how to improve the kind of shelf life of mushrooms at home. So I
Mhm.
love that idea.
I
Um,
don't know if our friends from Harmon's are on the call, but we talked to them at the RDBA virtual experience earlier this year, and they shared how they're merchandising it in store and sent me pictures, and I immediately shared it with the entire mushroom industry because I think this is just a fantastic idea. They're taking their private label mushrooms and putting them in those paper bags that have the little plastic window, almost like what you
yeah,
would have for coffee.
yeah,
With so many reasons this is great. Number one, it's in the bag, right? Which I love. It goes from the bag at the store and then right to your bag at the bag in fridge. So you don't have to
yeah,
make the transfer. It also has a ton of real estate on it. So we knew where these mushrooms came from. They came from, in Utah. They were grown in Utah. They are, great source of selenium. Here's a recipe. Here's the nutrition label. They could put so much information on this bag. It was incredible. I don't know what it costs or takes or anything to put that together. I'm going to be just turn a blind eye on some of that and just say everybody should do it. But it was just such a really cool way to merchandise them. It looked
yeah,
like a fresh way. I think that your mushrooms would last longer. And again, I love all the real estate on the bag. It just gives you so many opportunities to put, key nutrition information on, which, we're thrilled to have on there just to remind people how good mushrooms are for you.
yeah. So there are a couple of follow-up questions that have come in. So on the paper bag trick, does it work for whole and sliced or just whole?
Both.
Oh, awesome. Oh, good to know. And then a couple questions about freezing. So two questions, I'll tell them both to you and then you can answer. Would you blanch before freezing? And then Joni is saying that she has sauteed mushrooms and then they freeze. Great.
Yes, Joni, 100%. I wouldn't necessarily blanch them. Saute. You're going to just get more flavor. It's just going to cook better. Blanching, I think sometimes you're just putting too much water into them, and they're already
They're a
chock
high
full.
water veg anyway, so why do that?
Why
Okay.
do it? Yeah,
Yeah.
Joni's 100% correct. Saute
Okay.
those, and you could even if you saute them, you have them. If you had them sliced, you could do anything you want. You could still have them sliced, or you could chop them up and blend them after that. I mean,
Lots
I
of
love it.
options.
Thank you, Joni. Great idea.
So April and I were having a side conversation in the chat about air frying. So do you have tips around air frying veg? I mean, not veg, but mushrooms in general.
Yes. So this was like a TikTok thing, about a year and a half ago. I mean, not as popular as the feta and the tomatoes. Nothing ever will be. I mean, that was just a phenomenon. But we did start seeing a lot of people using their air fryer, and they were making jerky. But what was really yummy, we actually have a couple recipes on our site, mushroomcouncil.com, that use the air fryer. But like, doing like a fried mushroom. And one of the best ones I saw that we had done was with portobellos. And so they were like almost like fries, really yummy. Yes,
Oh,
the air fryer is
that's
just
super
a
interesting.
treat. I wish we could like invest like thousands and thousands of dollars in recipe development with the air fryer, because I think there's just so much untapped opportunity there. So yeah, if anybody has any ideas or wants to experiment, share it with us by all
Oh,
means.
that's all good.
I love
Awesome.
it.
Well, I think that is all. Wait, is there one more? Oh,
Drying.
okay, another question. Food preservation, tips on drying mushrooms.
I haven't seen any specifically. I don't know if we have any on our website. I mean, we very much are, even from a food preservation standpoint, I don't know if we've done much about how to dry the mushrooms. There might have been something around like with a dehydrator. I don't think we have anything specific like how you could roast them on a really, really, really low heat or anything. So I would be, I'm cautious to give you any tips in that area, but check out our website. We may have something. I know we just don't talk about drying all that much. We talk more about what you can eat now. Yeah.
Yeah, no, interesting for sure. Awesome, good. Well, I think that's all our questions. Thanks, Kim. This has been just a great webinar. For those of you who maybe joined a few minutes late, this webinar has been approved for 1 continuing education credit through CDR, and I will send out the certificate of attendance within the next 24 hours. Kim, are you comfortable sharing slides from today's webinar?
100%, yes.
Okay, and I will send those out along with the certificate. And then this webinar has been recorded and will be available on our DVA website within 1 week. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Thanks, Kim. Have a great rest of the day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.